Hello, welcome back for this, the final chapter of Book 1 of The Wealth of Nations, of the rent of land. In Chapter 6, Smith said that the price of an item came from three components: the cost of labour, the need for it to have a profit, and the cost of rent, which is the subject of this last chapter. Smith is talking about the price a tenant pays to use land, but it would also apply to shops or premises or any goods which a business has to rent. And the landlord wants this rent to be as high as possible. The landlord wants to leave the tenant enough money to cover their costs for hiring labour, for the equipment they need, and so on, plus some ordinary profit. But all the rest of the money, the landlord wants themselves. This level, Smith calls the natural rent. The landlord wants the most amount of rent he can get. The landlord knows the value of what his land can produce, and the level of rent will be based on that. One important point Smith makes is that the relationship between the price of an item and the rent is different than the relationship between the price of an item and wages and profit. High wages or profits cause high commodity prices, but high commodity prices cause high rents. This is because a trader or craftsman who can charge a high price for his goods can afford to pay a high rent, while one who cannot charge a high price does not have enough money to pay a high rent. Much of this chapter is a history of the price of silver and gold, and comparisons of those commodities with the price of grain. Smith refers in this chapter, and again throughout the book, to grain as the most essential commodity, a benchmark for true value. The price of gold or silver can fluctuate, but when he talks about the money price of grain being high, what he means is that silver is cheap. Smith was writing at a time when European powers followed an economic system called mercantilism, where governments protected their economies against other countries to try and accumulate as much gold and silver as possible. Smith was strongly against this system. He believed in the power of the free market. He uses the changing value of gold and silver against grain over the last few hundred years to show that wealth is not how much gold or silver a nation has. In looking at the factors affecting wages, profits and rent, Smith argues that supply and demand governs all of these, and that each is linked to the other. Smith believes in the market, and that over time, the market will tend to be self-regulating. He opposes forces which try to disrupt this natural balance. Government regulations that prevent wages from being decided by supply and demand hurt the economy. He is critical of employers who come together to keep wages down, while workers cannot come together to push wages up. And he is critical of landlords who usually, through an accident of birth, had a monopoly position from which to extract as much money as they could without having to make any effort. The market, when left to itself, possesses the forces that help it self-regulate. Goods and services are produced and exchanged most efficiently in a process that occurs naturally and on its own.